Hi kids, how are you? Well, it's another Sunday, isn't it? Another Sunday with COVID. But we're going to get around that, aren't we? Just like we did last week. I was so glad to hear that so many of you were watching last week. And you know what? Pastor Pete got a very nice note from Presley. She wrote a note thanking him for doing this. That was great. Presley, thank you for going to that trouble. That's something you didn't have to do, but you did it out of the goodness of your heart, and we thank you for that. Makes a lot of people feel good. Now, today, we're going to talk about the way Jesus used to teach lessons to people. He would tell stories, and those stories are called parables. Now, I know that a lot of you have heard the word parable before. And when people talk about it, you can figure out that it means a story. But some people aren't real sure about it. So I'm just going to tell you that that's what he did. And that's why he was so good at what he did. That's why people learn so much, because he would tell a story and people would think about how that story was like their life. He never would just say, okay, here's what you need to do, and tell everybody that. He would tell a story, and it would be about something that happened. So I'm going to tell you two stories today, and first I'm going to tell you where you can find them in the Bible. You remember that we talked about the Old Testament and the New Testament, and this is that Bible that's up in the Sunday school class that sometimes we use. You've got your own, I have my own. And by the way, if you don't have one, you might want to talk to mom and dad and see if they may take you to maybe a Christian bookstore and look at one that you think would be good. They could even call Pastor Pete on the phone, and Pastor Pete would maybe suggest some good Bibles for you. This is the Deep Blue Bible, and it has those stories in the Bible. And the reason it does is because we have to know what we're supposed to do, and we learn what we're supposed to do through those stories that Jesus told. Those, what are they called again? Parables. Parables. Remember? Here's that word again. Parable. A story. Now, it's not just a story. It always has a point to it. And it has, after you read it, you're like, okay, that's the way it needs to be. That's the way I need to do. Because it wasn't just a story like you tell a scary story. It has a point to it, and it drives it home, and it teaches you something, always. That's why they call Jesus the teacher, because he was so good at doing just that. Now, I'm going to read to you from the Bible, and then I'm going to pick it apart and tell you what it means. Because sometimes when you hear it, you're not real sure. You're reading the words, but maybe you're not real sure. But I think as you listen in your mind, I want you to picture what's going on. I'm going to kind of get it ready for you. And Jesus is in the temple, and he is teaching. And guess what? The main people are there, the chief priests. Now, Jesus just walked in there, Now, the chief priests were wearing their robes. They had these big robes and these hats that they wore, and they had these things that went down here. And if you saw them, you knew they were the chief priests. They weren't just a priest, the chief priests, the big people. And they got a lot of respect in town because they had studied a long, long time, and they knew a lot of things that most of the people that live in the village didn't know. They knew how to write. They knew how to read other languages. They studied the scripture, and they learned about the laws of God. And they told that to all the people, and everybody went to them for what you were supposed to do. They were kind of rulers, like that. Well, So they were there, and here comes Jesus. You know, this guy that they're hearing about, and they're starting to talk about him a lot because you know what's happening? People that would come to them have started coming to them and saying, hey, I'd really like to talk to Jesus about this. I wonder what he'd have to say about this. And you know, it kind of made them a little angry because then they were like, who is this guy? Well, here comes Jesus, and Jesus is starting to talk about the laws, and the way he sees it, and the way he says that God has talked to him. And they don't like it, and they say, you know, they start talking to him, and they say, well, let me just read you what they say, okay? When Jesus entered the temple, the chief priests and elders of the people came to him as he was teaching. Because, you know, they're looking and they're going, who is this guy? What's he doing over there? And they asked, what kind of authority do you have for doing these things? Who gave you this authority? Now, I want to stop here because Pastor Pete is sitting right here. Now, Pastor Pete is our minister. Have you ever been in his office? What does he have on the wall? Pastor Pete, what do you have on the wall?
Well, on my wall, sometimes I have things that are like certificates that show my education.
Yeah.
That show what I've accomplished as far as the classroom. And also they show that I've been certified to become a pastor. So there's licensing, there's all kinds of things like that on the wall and certificates.
On the wall. And it tells you that he's not faking it. He is for real. He's our pastor, and he went to school for that, and it's right there on the wall. We can see it. I went to the dentist today, and I looked on the wall, and I saw that my dentist is for real. She went to school, and she finished school, and then they said she could pick around in my mouth, you know? Because I really would be afraid to go to somebody that didn't know what they were doing. Well, here's the whole problem. The chief priests were looking around, and they were like, this guy doesn't have any certificates on the wall. Hey, what gives him the authority? Why is he able to do that and talk to these people? He hasn't been through what we've been through. So they didn't like it. So they felt like they needed to go up to him and talk to him personally. And they said to him, who gave you this authority? And Jesus replied, I have a question for you. If you tell me the answer, I'll tell you what kind of authority that I have to do these things. See, Jesus didn't just answer yes or no, did he? He always had a good comeback. Where did John, and by the way, John was his cousin, John the Baptist, and John had been around all over the countryside teaching that Jesus was, coming and that he was going to be the Savior and all of this. And everybody listened to John, too, a lot at that point. John was, very well known. He was like a celebrity, like a movie star. Everybody knew John. They knew his name. That was a big deal. People know your name. Okay, John did get his authority to baptize. Did he get it from heaven or from humans? Okay, so that was what Jesus wanted to know. Did John get, when John would baptize someone, did the baptism, did he become saved when he was baptized by God? Was he able to do that? Or was it just what people said? People said, not God, people. And so the chief priest went off in a corner, and you could see them. They were all talking about it, trying to decide. Well, they were talking about it for a long time, and they said, you know what? Here's the problem. If we say that it came from heaven, that God gave John, Jesus' cousin, the ability to baptize people and make them Christians, if we say that, then nobody's going to listen to us anymore. We're going to be like losers. They'll start following Jesus and they won't follow us. And we're big deal now. We're a big deal. So we can't say heaven, can we? But then, if we say, it's from man, like people are saying it. Well, we're afraid to say that because if we say that, we're afraid of the crowd, and everyone thinks that John's a prophet, and people won't like that either, you know, because they're saying that he's getting it from God. And so,
not to answer the question, they wouldn't answer it.
and so then they turn around. So here they come. They come back to Jesus. Jesus is waiting now. He's wondering what the big deal is. And you know what they say? We don't know. Chicken. They were afraid to say it, weren't they? They were afraid. They were afraid. They were playing. You know when we say politics a little bit, they were afraid. They didn't want to make these people mad, and they didn't want to make these people mad. So they said, we don't know. And then Jesus said this. Well, hey, since you don't know, I'm not going to tell you who gave me the authority to do what I'm doing. Now, when you can tell me, I'll tell you. Because you know what, boys and girls? If they could tell him, then they would know the truth, wouldn't they? They would know the truth. And they didn't know the truth. They did not believe. They did not believe that that was Jesus and what all he could do. They didn't believe it. They were really getting afraid of it because they knew he was getting real popular. Okay, that was one parable, okay? That was about authority, and that was Jesus in the temple. That's in the Bible, in the New Testament, in Matthew. Then there's another story, and it is about, it's the parable, the story of the two sons. Okay, now, back in those days, they raised grapes a lot because they did drink water, but sometimes the water wasn't real good, so they drank wine, and wine, because wine had things in it that would kill any germs that were in the water. So they drank wine. And they had a lot of vineyards, a lot of grape vineyards, and grapes would grow, and then they would take the grapes and they would make the wine from the grapes. That's where you get wine, from grapes. Learned something today, didn't you? And anyway, so the man that owned the vineyard had two sons. So he came up to one son and he said to him, hey, son, I need you to go work the vineyard today. And that son said, nah, I don't think so, Dad. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And then, he went off. But guess what? He started thinking about it, and he did go and do what his dad asked him. But first he told his dad no, but then he did do it. Okay, so then the dad, he probably thinks nobody's working in the vineyard, so he goes to the second son, and he says to the second son, I need you to work in the vineyard today. And that son goes, sure, Dad, I'll do it. I'll sure do it. And so then the dad goes off. Do you think the second son did it? No. He told him one thing, and he didn't do it. And so, if I'm asking you this, who do you think is the son that is I don't want to use the word better son, but the son that did what God would want him to do? You're right. Number one son. The one that first said no, and then the one that did it. And did what his dad asked him to do. And you know what? That's a lot like us. That's what Jesus was trying to prove. That's what Christians are like. Sometimes we're not sure if we're doing the right thing or what we're doing. And then, we start thinking about it, and then we do the right thing. Isn't that right? So that's what these boys did. So we need to always remember one thing is always trust God and have faith, because, everything he says in the Bible is true. And these are stories that he's told us so that we'll learn. And we will learn that maybe sometimes we're not sure if we don't want to do the right thing, but then in our heart we know we should, and we do. And that's what we do. It was so good to talk to you all today. Pastor Pete, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I would just say, that example about helping around the house really is true, because that's what the dad needed was, his children to help him. And it's one thing to say you're going to do it and not do it, but it's another boy, he said, I wasn't going to do it, but he did do it. So it's like this expression we have called your actions speak louder than your words. The words are important too. The actions are important. You want to say the right thing, but ultimately the actions are really important. And so when you show love by being obedient to your mom and dad or your teacher, that's an example of God's love. We want to say the right words too, but the actions are what's the most important to make sure that they actually got the work done. So if your mom says make up your bed, we need to say yes, ma'am, and go do it and get it done. That's the most important thing, but not just to say yes so that she'll think, well, she'll get to it, but go ahead and do it is the most important thing. So anything you can do to help, feed your dog, take care of your cat, do all these things, take the trash out, all these things, when you do it, by your actions speak very loudly.
And always remember too, one thing when I was reading this too, and I was thinking to myself, that first son said no first, isn't that right? How many times have you told your parents no? Or maybe you're like, mother says, go wash the dishes. I know we all hated to do that. After you eat, it's your turn, and you're like grumbling, or you're watching TV, and you're like, in a minute. I know you say that. And so, but if you say, in a minute, and then you just think, well, a minute goes to hours, and, you haven't done it. And you think, well, mother will do it because I'm not going to, get up. Well, but that number one son said no first also. And then he realized what was right. And that's why the boy that said yes first, he wasn't the good boy, was he? Because he didn't do it. And his dad had depended on him because he had said yes. So always know that sometimes you might feel like saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with that, but always know that you need to do the right thing. And that means do what was asked for you, okay? You guys have a great week, and you know what? We'll see you soon, okay? Things are changing.
Bye-bye.
Love you.